Okay, you do crime, you read a lot of what's happening, and this is a question I asked one of your fellow directors when he was here, that you have television and you have purveyors of facts such as ourselves, of course, honorable exceptions, the Express Group, but everything is covered with, there's Dhinchak music, it's a sensationally like fiction. You watch the television news on most channels. So do you think it puts a perverse responsibility on the purveyors of fiction to actually do a better job delivering reality? Because reality is being delivered in the most bizarre ways these days with all the drums and fakeness to it. So does that put pressure on fiction to do something completely different?
There's no connection, but I get zapped when I see background music on news. Background music and effects and so on, and...
How do you rate the effects, both of you? Who does good effects behind the evening news?
Who does?
I don't watch. Yeah. I haven't seen.
For drums or music?
No, I do watch, but I watch it just almost like, oh, watch it to put it off, kind of thing. So I watch for some time and I say, okay, enough.
So do you think that kind of challenges fiction makers of fiction films and stuff, writers?
I don't know whether challenges, because when you're doing a story of a film, it's a separate thing. You don't think about, of course, naturally you think about, okay, this is going to the same audience and so on. So, but I don't think it affects me when I'm working on a film. There's no connection. I'm not trying to pander or try to make it like that and so on. So that sort of thing doesn't happen.
Sridhar, you said you don't watch any news, but you're a writer. So what is your...
I'm a reader. So
okay, you don't watch...
any time I get, I read a lot. I don't watch TV news, or I don't get my news through the television. I'm very old-fashioned. I get it through the newspapers. I will also follow up on an article, etc., in different ways. But I haven't turned on a television in a few years, actually.
A little aside and a disclosure, but Sridhar is a sort of a fellow colleague, and he was with the Indian Express, and I think he notched up 1,000 bylines before you decided to give it all up, right?
Yeah.
What was that about?
No. I don't know in what context I said that. I was talking about I forgot the context now. But the thing is...
to leave, I think, journalism. You decided to pack it.
No, I left journalism for a very different reason. I was a feature writer. So I used to write longer pieces, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 words and stuff. And I was primarily a fiction. I published a lot of short fiction. Back then there were magazines, Mirror and various other places, which used to publish. I noticed that anytime I published a story, after 3 months the magazine would shut down. And I was intrigued at the connection. And gradually I realized I was becoming vestigial. So it's like a dinosaur who's watching the meteor coming every day. So I shifted to journalism as a consequence because I wanted to continue writing. But then, after a point, I again was like getting, like I said, I have a short attention span. So I did a bit of this, a bit of that, did 3-4 years of it, and I wanted to do something else. And I again felt vestigial. I felt this is again going to kind of end. I was never a proper reporter in the sense. I used to still do features even when I was slightly longer pieces.
Just a connected question. Your award-winning film, which Rajkumar Hirani edited, which you made, which has this lovely theme of...
8-column affair.
Yeah, the 8-column affair, where it's a morning newspaper, and there's a news story of the first column who falls in love with the 8th column. So he decides to meet her, so he has to walk through the entire newspaper before the next morning, before the stories change. So, that's clear. It's a sort of thing a newspaper buff or, insiders would understand and be completely ecstatic over, that kind of completely wonderful story. What pulled you out of print into cinema?
Actually, when I first came to Bombay, I wanted to become a journalist. That was I wanted to write, actually. But I used to have a very bad stammer, and I actually went to enroll in some college of journalism and kind of thing. And in the train, on the way, I saw one ad for Stardust, trainee journalist. So I said, okay, let me also apply for that. It might sort of take care of a couple of things, 2 words with 1 stone kind of thing. But, because at that time, and I used to have a very bad stammer. He also had, but mine was like...
No, we both were historically bad stammerers.
So,
you mean good stammerers?
And it becomes like, at that time, to make a call. Now on the phone, I can see who's calling and I can say hi straight, To make a call and say my name used to be a little difficult at that time, So I used to be very quiet and reserved and withdrawn. And that's not how a journalist can be, you know. So I was chucked out in 4 months.
Well, we can tell you more, but it's okay. No, I think we will keep. No,
So,
I think
no,
everybody has all these ideas about journalists, about how they are all these outgoing people who are constantly talking. But you know, we are all.
No, but we couldn't say our own
yeah.
name. So imagine you're
Yeah.
calling up somebody to interview them. And
I'm
you
often-
change the topic. Then where are you calling from? I couldn't say the name of the person, the company I worked for. I couldn't say my own name. It was damn shady.
But for someone like that, you actually managed to, you know, have conversations with political leaders and
Yeah. See, what happens is,
have them ask you to leave.
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, but you know, you should maybe share. who
I used to briefly, I dabbled briefly in political journalism, but I got chucked out of both the assignments I was on. Once I was interviewing Mr. VP Singh, I got chucked out. Then I had gone to do some story in Baramati, I got chucked out. Then somebody sent me to do a piece on business. And I went to meet the head of SEBI and I asked him, what's the share? I got chucked out. So, and then luckily my boss really liked me and he said, okay, you do crime, you do health, you do humor. Because that's the things which, they were more tolerant, I guess. And yeah, so.
So, all right. So basically, both of you being storytellers, right? And it has always been very difficult for people to actually give the story the primacy because the star has always been the bigger factor in Bollywood, pretty much. How does it work for the both of you? Story being higher than the star.
See, he has one advantage over here because he's a director. So, to a great degree, he can also tell the story that he seeks to. But anyway, go on. And then
No, I mean, for me, it's always the story which takes primacy in that sense. So, I mean, it's not like, you know, oh, my last film did well, so the next one should have a bigger, I mean, that kind of I don't have that kind of an ambition, you know. So here, I mean, I don't know, if you decide to go with just the story and who suits it, usually the stars I worked with are all stars when they were on the verge of becoming stars, sort of. You know, I have not really worked with, other than one film with Saif and Kareena, Agent Vinod, where they were both bona fide established big stars, and that was my biggest kind of a film. Otherwise, the rest of them are people who are kind of, you know, just on the, I mean, they've just done 2 films or 3 films kind of thing. And they are not, I mean, I feel, I mean, I try to go for the story and whoever suits it best. You know, it doesn't matter whether their last film was a success or my last film was a success. My last film matters to them, but otherwise it doesn't matter to me.
What about you?
No, what I meant earlier when I said as a director, he has a slight advantage is it's not that easy for you to get the stories that you write out there. Because eventually, to a great extent, it is what the studio wants to make or the director wants to make. That's, I mean, I've been in the business long enough to figure out that, of course, you get to tell the stories you want. But the proportion is, it's usually, if there's a director who wants to make a certain sort of story, or a studio wants to make a story, or obviously an actor wants to do a certain kind of story, then they rope in writers for that particular thing. The number of speculative scripts, which is, by spec scripts, what I mean is stories you're writing where you manage to convince the star, the director, the studio to come on board, the proportion is much, much lesser.
Would you also talk us through the difference there is between, say, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Marathi cinema and how they approach stories? Or is it for a story writer or a screenwriter, is Bombay a better place? Or is there a difference in how the various language industries work?
I mean, the language industry has that one advantage of it can be much more rooted and much more, you know, authentic in that sense, you know. Though Hindi movies, some of them at least are now moving into, I mean, we are recently having stories which are set in small towns and you can take a little city and you can set your story there. But earlier it was not, it didn't happen even 5 years back, you know. Now it's happening. But regional, that's the main advantage they get. So their stories can be actually specific and universal, whereas Hindi film has to be universal first, you know. I mean,
Uzbekistan, actually, yeah. I mean, you have to cater to all kinds.
Because you're doing a pan-India kind of thing, whereas, I mean, some of the best work right now is actually happening, say, in Malayalam and stuff. I'm sure, I mean, in regional, there's some fabulous storytelling happening. I don't know why it's happening, but yes, it's definitely because the stories are more rooted. I guess to some extent the cost of making those films is lower, the risks may be lower, I don't really know. But all I know is that, yeah, last couple of years, some really fabulous Malayalam films. In Marathi also, last year, a film which, I don't know whether you saw, Dr. Kashinath Ghanekar, if you saw that. Again, there's so many interesting tales which are coming out.
Thank you so much for being with us and being wonderful guests.